Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining me is Kellyanne Smith, Personal Finance Expert and Reporter at Forbes Advisors, a trusted destination for unbiased personal finance advice, news, and reviews, to discuss how to overcome overspending, lessons learned from COVID-19, and making sense of the government's budget. Kellyanne, we have a lot to unpack here. Welcome to Trade Talks.
Thanks so much for having me.
And even with careful planning, sometimes traditional budget planning may not always go as planned. And we have certainly experienced that in 2020 as a result of COVID-19. What were some mistakes that people recognized during the pandemic?
Yeah, I think that COVID-19 has just been a huge wake-up call for a lot of people, specifically, the people who have disposable income each month, not really people who are living paycheck to paycheck. But for the people who do have disposable income, I think that this really showed them that they need to be paying attention to their personal finances. I think a lot of people create budgets, but then maybe work on it for a week and then everything goes haywire after that. I mean, it's really easy to overspend. It's really easy to be overwhelmed by a budget. But I really think that COVID-19 showed people that we need to be more serious with our money. We need to be more thoughtful with how we're spending and more intentional with what we want to do with it. And so building a budget plays a big role in that. And I think that the big takeaway here is people need to be more conscious of their budget and how it progresses throughout the month.
If we look for the silver lining in this, do you think people will be more careful or at least more aware of budgeting for unforeseen events?
Oh, absolutely. I think people are absolutely going to take this as an opportunity to take a hold of their personal finances. I think a lot of people are seeing, how quickly their lives can be flipped upside down. I mean, we all saw the economy come to literally a screeching halt. And it was hard for a lot of people. It continues to be hard. So I think that people are going to really take this as an opportunity to sit down, reassess where they're at with their money, think about where they want to be with it, and get back to the basics, get back to their budget, really being intentional with every dollar. I think people are definitely going to value that a lot more now. Absolutely.
How do you overcome overspending, and why do weekly allowances work? What's the science behind that?
Yeah, overspending, it's super easy. It happens to all of us, especially now, transactions are increasingly digital. We're not physically handing over our money anymore. So it's so easy to just swipe your credit card and say, I'll worry about it next week or next month. But a great way to overcome overspending is to switch your budget maybe to a weekly allowance, which means you take your disposable income for the month, divide it by 4, and then that's the amount of money you can spend each week to stay on track with your spending and with your budget. And, that's like your fun money. And the great thing about a weekly allowance is it gives you a lot of freedom, and it also gives you a lot of flexibility. If you mess up one week, you can readjust for the next. If you do great one week and are under your goals, maybe you can do something special the week after, maybe go out an extra night to dinner or something. And weekly allowances, they really make it easy for us to conceptualize the impact that one specific purchase is going to have on your overall budget for the week. When you are talking about a monthly budget and you're thinking, 3 weeks down the line, it can be a lot harder to figure out how that purchase in that moment is going to affect you 3 weeks later. So a weekly allowance, it takes a lot of the guesswork out of it, a lot of, the complicated math, and it just makes it easier and more flexible for people to be with their spending.
What apps do you recommend to keep all this in check?
Yeah, there are a ton of apps, ton of budgeting apps. One that I do know about, I'm not endorsing it, but Capital, it's a great one, Capital with a Q. And that's a good one because it'll show you your weekly spending goals. And it has an interface where it breaks it all down with charts, bar graphs, things like that. So to stay on track. But since there are so many budgeting apps out there, I would recommend that people go out and search for a few on the App Store and actually try them, because it's very personal. The way you interact with your money is personal, and so I think it really comes down to which app might work best for them. So I definitely recommend just putting yourself out there and trying them. I mean, there's no harm in that.
Yep, and it's a good time to start thinking about it, especially that we're not commuting, that cost isn't factored in, but at some point it will be again. So this is a good time to start thinking about that as just one example. Now, Kellyanne, we've covered personal finance, but what about the debt of our government and the trillions of dollars in the deficit? Why is there so much debt?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's top of the mind of a lot of people. And if you look pre-pandemic, the federal deficit was over 1 trillion, but the pandemic is really what has made it skyrocket in a way. And the $2 trillion CARES Act that was passed in March has a lot to do with it. But I think when we talk about the current federal deficit, I think we need to be really careful with how it affects our conversations of, more economic aid from the government in the future. The economy is actually handling the current deficit well. The Federal Reserve has implemented monetary policy to help, keep it balanced, keep it going. And Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell has even voiced recently more support. He says we need more support from the federal government to continue to get the economy and the American people through this. So I think it's one thing to be worried about the federal deficit, but I think the way that we talk about it right now in the terms of COVID, definitely really different, because it's not like, the government's going to continue spending at this rate. And also a lot of economists, there's no like set level of debt for a country for when we start seeing it affect the economy. And the Federal Reserve still has additional tools it can tap into to help the economy continue to power through this. So that's just where we're at right now, and who knows where we're going.
All right, Kellyanne, thanks for joining us on Trade Talks.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. And thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.